Okanagan song, you may have heard it. Translated, the first words are, "We are beautiful, we are Okanagan, because our land is beautiful." And I think these are words we can all aspire to. And that is the interest that's brought us together today. We want to look at opportunities to create a beautiful, resilient Okanagan community. 2021 is the 6th year for our nonprofit society, First Things First Okanagan. Our mission is to promote awareness of climate change and to work to find solutions for a better future. We write letters, we lobby elected officials, we sponsor public talks, we've had 3 conferences, we sponsor school programs, and we work with other climate organizations. A year ago, we were preparing for a big Smart Energy Expo. It was going to be held at the Lakeside Conference Center in April. There was going to be electric cars, retrofit ideas, solar energy installers. It's going to be our biggest thing yet. That was April, and everyone knows what happens. So we have adapted to COVID by developing this deep dive discussion series. And this is our 4th meeting. So every month we get together, a deep dive brings together different perspectives. We are focusing on climate solutions. So local experts, officials, concerned citizens, we come together, learn together. And what we hope is that we can build connections and gain insight into what we can accomplish here in the Okanagan. Each session delves into a specific topic. We send out a list of videos and short articles. And if you haven't had a chance to read them, I do encourage you, if you haven't had a chance to do that little bit of homework, it's really worth it. So I'm thrilled tonight that we have some staff and city councillors from Penticton, Oliver, the RDOS joining us. That's just the kind of forum we were hoping to build here in this deep dive discussion series. And we have Chris Allen and David Cassian joining us tonight as speakers. But before we begin, I'd like to introduce fellow board member Lori Goldman. Maybe you could wave Lori. She's our Zoom technician. Chat with her in the chat box if you have any technical issues. The session will be recorded for note taking, and we have our own YouTube channel. We're really getting fancy. So we will probably have a private link. It won't be publicly available, but we'll send you the private link if you'd like to watch this again or send it to a friend.
Has everyone done the poll?
Yes, before I was just going to ask, are you able to put the results of the poll on the screen? Okay, gas, really 62%. Electric, solar, 14% solar. Heat pump, wood stove, combination. Very interesting to see. I don't know if that, for me, I thought more people would be electric. I'm gratified to see that there's quite a few heat pumps and solar being used, and quite a few still using wood heat, including me, in combination. That's what we have in our house. So thanks very much, everyone, for doing that.
Mark, I didn't get mine in there, but I'm electric and heat pump.
Okay, thanks. Now we're ready to begin, I think, our evening conversation. If you could all mute yourselves and also turn off your video feed just for now while we have the presentations. I'm going to turn things over to Sue Kirschman. She's also a board member. She's co-hosting this evening, and she's going to introduce our topic and guest speakers.
Sorry, I just, thanks everybody. Thanks everyone for joining us tonight. As Margaret said, it's great to see so many people here, and thank you for coming. So our topic tonight is buildings and energy. Buildings create about 20% of Penticton's greenhouse gas emissions, which makes them the second biggest contributor to emissions in our area. After transportation, sorry, I just lost my. Notes there. Buildings are also our big energy users, and they're responsible for almost 50% of the city's energy consumption. So tonight we're going to look at buildings from both an emissions and an energy consumption perspective. So we'll get started with our guest speakers. During the presentations, if you think of any questions you'd like to ask, please type them into the chat that's at the bottom of your screen. And afterwards, we'll be having a moderated question period, and we'll use those questions from the chat. So our first guest speaker is Chris Allen, who many of you probably already know. He's an architect, AIBC, Architectural Institute of BC, and he's the principal of Landform Architecture Limited. Chris was raised in a logging camp on Adams Lake and has never forgotten that the act of building has consequences for the land. He studied regionalist design at Dalhousie University in Halifax and returned to the Okanagan to practice in 2003. His design work focuses on carefully placed, energy efficient buildings. So welcome, Chris, and please go ahead.
All right, thank you, Sue. And I'll share my screen and bring up my presentation. Okay, is that visible to you?
Perfect.
Okay, great. All right, thank you, Sue, and thank you everybody for coming tonight. So as was mentioned, I'm going to speak about passive house principles, and I'm going to focus on two projects that we've done. So as Sue said, I'm Chris Allen, and my firm is Landform Architecture, and we're based here in Penticton. The two projects I'll talk about tonight are the Ecosage Project, which was done for the Penticton Indian Band in 2013, and the Okanagan College Daycare, which was done for Okanagan College here in Penticton in 2017. And in both of these projects, we pursued a program called Passive House, which is a program that originated in Austria and Germany and which is now spread around the world, and basically tries to bring the energy use of buildings down to an absolute minimum. So just a little bit of context to begin with. British Columbia has committed to something called the STEP Code, and that's been written into the building code for the province. And the goal of STEP Code is that by 2032, all new buildings in British Columbia will be net zero ready, which basically means that with a reasonable investment in renewables, they can be made to be net zero energy. And then as a country, Canada has committed to net zero carbon emissions by 2050. So the work that we're doing, the work I'm going to talk about tonight, is moving towards these goals. The Ecosage project, as I say, was done in 2013. We worked with Tabitha Enius at Penticton Indian Band, who runs their housing program. The builder was Nick Hill from Ritchie Custom Homes, and we had quite a bit of assistance from Fortis BC. Funding for the project came from the Penticton Indian Band, the Ministry of Energy Mines, etc., Fortis BC, and a contribution from Solar BC. The funding primarily came from a program called the Super Efficient New Construction Program, which the provincial government was administering. And the goal was to construct super efficient, marketable homes that would achieve a minimum energy rating, primarily through passive solar design, envelope construction, and super efficient equipment. And the houses through the Penticton Indian Band were given out to band members who could carry a mortgage. And that was a new program at that time. There's quite a housing shortage for band members, but these houses in particular, you needed to be able to demonstrate that you could carry a mortgage to qualify, and 8 houses were constructed. And that meant that primarily these houses were paid for by the owners of the houses. So despite the funding from the provincial government and other sources, primarily they were being funded by the people moving into the houses. So they were located on the west side of the valley. This is a picture of the site before the houses went in. Unfortunately, a very typical suburban environment had been created with the road before we got involved. So we had to put these houses on fairly standard lots. But other than that, it was a fairly pristine environment. There were 8 houses in total, and we arranged them all so they would face as close to south as possible. 6 of the houses were to EnerGuide 88 standard. 1 was rated by the LEED standard, so LEED Platinum. And then the final one, which I'll focus on tonight, was certified passive house. The designs for the homes was very simple to keep costs down. Landscaping, again, xeriscape landscaping, durable materials, fire resistant. The plan of the buildings was a simple rectangle, 4 bedrooms, a living space, and then all the services along the north side. And in section, we sloped the roof up towards the south to open the buildings up towards the southern sun, and in that way get passive solar heat gain. The rest of the building was super insulated and openings were kept to a minimum. The key to passive house certification and really to energy efficient design is the insulation. So the houses were designed to be super insulated boxes. We had light frame trusses for the roof, double 2x4 stud walls, and a well insulated slab on grade. And then that was made airtight so that the minimum of heat and air would be lost through the assembly. So this is a section through the north side of the building. So you can see the large amount of insulation. So R71 in the roof, in that truss space, the walls, a double 2x4 stud wall, so that we could get R57 in the walls, which is about 3 times what building code minimums would be, triple glazed windows. And then the slab on grade is supported on 11 inches of EPS rigid insulation. And the insulated layer goes completely around the perimeter of the building to reduce thermal bridging. And then the south side of the building, we tried to get as much glass as possible to allow that winter sun to give you passive solar heat gain. We have exterior shading to block the sun during the summer, and a good overhang also to block that sun during the summer. Outside, the buildings had very generous overhangs. So I particularly like this picture because it shows how that roof overhang on the south side, this is taken in about July, perfectly shades all those windows along that south side. You're getting a very little bit of sun coming in at the living room, but for the most part, completely protected from the sun in the summer. And in the winter, with the low sun angle, these windows would all be getting full sunlight. And the very light roof structure was supported by an exterior steel structure to provide protection all the way around the house. The siding is cement board and the roof is corrugated metal so that they're very fire resistant. Of course, it's in an interface area. The windows are triple glazed, a hybrid of PVC and fiberglass. And the insulation is mineral wool that's manufactured in Grand Forks. Inside the houses, we had an exposed heated slab, and we used locally sourced wood for slat ceilings. The equipment for the house, very efficient. So we had a heat recovery ventilator so that lots of fresh air is brought into the space without dumping it to the exterior. We had a brine loop below the slab to preheat that heat recovery ventilator, air source heat pumps, solar hot water, high efficiency lighting. We had switches on the electrical outlets so that you could switch the whole house off when you left, and get rid of all those trickle loads that apparently add up to a fair bit of electricity over the course of a day. Daylight sensors to turn lights off when they weren't being used, and of course, energy efficient appliances. And so basically those first two elements, the envelope and then the efficient equipment, is reducing the amount of heat that you lose and then generating warmth in the most efficient fashion. So you're reducing your demand for heat and then providing it in an efficient fashion. But there will always be some need for energy. So the energy that was required by the building is provided through renewable sources. So there was a 9-panel photovoltaic array put on the building, a solar hot water array, and then of course we're relying on passive solar heat gain, natural daylighting, and natural cross ventilation to reduce the requirements for mechanical equipment to run as much as possible. As I said at the beginning, the project was intended to be low-cost housing, so we focused quite intently in the detailing on making it easy to construct in a very simple shape. Construction cost per house was $239,800. So the cost per square foot, $151 a square foot, and it took 6 months to build the 8 houses. This is far quicker and far less expensive than most of the other buildings that we work on. Typical housing costs in the Okanagan in 2013 were $200 to $250 a square foot. You know, now that's risen to $300 to $350. And typical construction time, 9 to 12 months. So despite the additional effort that went into making these homes energy efficient, it did not make them more expensive or longer to construct. So how did we do in terms of meeting our initial target? The energy use of the homes is about 45% of what a typical home would use. So a typical code built house of the same square footage would be about 20,000 kilowatt hours a year. These ones were under 10,000. So that would mean it would take about 27 solar panels to become energy neutral. Now, because we provided 9 panels with construction, if the owners of these homes wanted to go to net zero, it would be an additional investment of about $12,000 to bring them to that level. So we took the things that we had learned from the Ecosage project, and a few years later, we had the opportunity to do a daycare for Okanagan College. Okanagan College has been very forward thinking in terms of pushing sustainable design and construction on their campus. And so for this project, they really wanted to see a certified passive house project. So we put together many of the members of the team from Ecosage. So our architectural group and Ritchie Custom Homes as the builder went in as a design build proposal. And then we brought on board a team of local engineers from the Valley, Arcaneers out of Kelowna, Associated Engineering out of Kelowna, BC Building Science from the Lower Mainland advised us on our building envelope, and Certifiers Cooperative, who are actually out of Portland, Oregon, did our passive house certification. And it's quite an elaborate model, and it needs to be a third-party certification. So it was important to have a good partner for that part of the project. The location is on the Okanagan College campus. It's the easternmost portion, and up until the time this building went in was basically a dog park, a meadow area. The main campus, including their living building, are to the west. Again, the plan for the building, very simple. Having a minimal envelope really helps you to achieve these energy efficiency goals. So again, a rectangular plan. There were 4 main childcare rooms. We tried to keep most of the windows towards the south, and then the services and mechanical rooms are towards the north. Openings on the north are small for ventilation. Openings on the south are large to get that winter sun. The assembly, again, focusing on really creating something that has a high level of insulation. So we actually used polystyrene insulation to create a raft slab form. So there was no formwork for the slab. We actually used the insulation to create the shape of the slab with thickenings where we needed it, and then poured the slab right into the insulation and left the insulation there. The rest of the envelope of the building was wood. So again, double stud wood walls, pre-engineered truss roof structure. And in this case, we used blown-in cellulose insulation because we could get really thick insulation values, especially in the roof. The equipment for the building, we had a very airtight building assembly. So we spent a lot of time taping up and sealing that assembly. I think 0.39 air changes is the lowest number that has been achieved in the Okanagan. Heat recovery ventilator to get maximum fresh air inside. So of course, if your building's very airtight, you want to bring in fresh air, so the heat recovery ventilator does that in a way that doesn't waste a lot of heat. Air source heat pumps. We had an earth tube to bring in air that would preheat our hot water, a heat pump water heater, and energy efficient lighting. And this picture is a view down the main hall of the building. So you can see on the north side, there's high level windows that bring natural light into that space. A section through the building that shows how it performs. So it has a cooling mode, which is used for about 5% of the year, where the windows are closed and the heat pumps provide cool air to the space. It has a heating mode, which is used for about 25% of the year, similar to the cooling mode, except the heat pumps provide warm air, and the winter sun provides quite a bit of passive solar heat gain. And then the bulk of the year, it operates in what we call passive mode, which means nothing should be operating except your hot water. And so you open the windows and air flows naturally. Sorry, that's my timer. Through the space and out through the clerestory windows. And what you get with that strategy is a bright, open, airy space, which has large windows that bring in natural light. So you can see in these pictures, the lights aren't on during the day. Large windows on the south side of the building. So how did we do on this building? So with the daycare, the building uses only 25% of the energy of a typical commercial building. So a typical commercial building would use about 305 kilowatt hours per square meter. This one uses 72. In a year, it consumes about 16,000 kilowatt hours of electricity. There's no gas, no carbon emitting fuels in the building whatsoever. And so for that 16,000 kilowatt hours a year, it would require about 45 solar panels to become energy neutral, which would cost the college about $30,000. And the roof has actually been sized to fit about 90 panels. So when those go on, which I'm sure the college will do in the next few years, it will be more than energy positive. But building energy use isn't the only way that buildings use energy. There's embodied energy. So the construction of a building also uses carbon. So because we're working with Okanagan College, their Sustainable Construction Management Technology program analyzed this building, and they found that it sequestered more carbon than it used for material extraction, manufacture, transport, assembly, and 100 years of operation. And that's basically because the structure of the building is wood, and the blown-in cellulose insulation is also a wood product. And so the carbon that went into growing those trees is more than this building has embodied in its assembly. We don't use a lot of steel, concrete, or aluminum in this building, and that really helps because those are high energy materials to produce. So conclusions, the 2032 net zero ready target is achievable, and it's also affordable if buildings are designed correctly. This is just a case study of a house that we did in Naramata around the same time as the Ecosage Project. And the interesting thing here is the annual energy consumption, once you subtract what they get from their photovoltaic array, is about 1/10 of the Canadian average. And carbon emissions from this building are 1% of the Canadian average for a home. So this was in 2013, and essentially we had already met the intent of Canada's 2050 commitment. And solar panels, which are the other part of being net zero ready, are achievable on any building, and they are now affordable. So let's get on with it. Thank you.
That's great, Chris. If you can stop sharing your screen, that'd be super. We do have a few questions.
All right.
Which I'll do now. We've got some time, so people feel free to turn your screens on if you wish to. I'll do the same thing, actually. The first question is, did you, from Ryan, did you use prefab construction to keep costs down? Or was the time, the time of construction part of the decision to do that?
Yeah, I mean, we absolutely did. The Ecosage Project, 7 of the homes used structural insulated panels, SIPs. So that really, eliminated the need to do framing other than interior walls. So we definitely used that. On the passive house component of Ecosage, we used pre-engineered roof trusses. Other than that, we didn't use fully prefabricated components. It was site built. Other than that.
Great. Another question is, you mentioned that if they put more panels on the Ecosage buildings, they could be net zero. Was the roof built with room to put those panels on it, or would you have to do an extension?
Yeah, absolutely. So the 9 panels that were on there already take up maybe 1/10 of the length of that building. So, to get 27, that would easily fit on the roof of any of those houses.
Could you give us a definition of net zero? We all hear it, but I think we're not, me included, necessarily sure what it means.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it means you could look at it in terms of carbon, or you could look at it in terms of energy. So, net zero carbon is essentially accomplished in British Columbia if you are all electric. So all of the buildings I talked about tonight are all electric. They don't use gas. So in terms of carbon, there's a little bit of carbon emitted by our grid, but it's very, very small. So in terms of net zero carbon, just using electricity gets you there in BC, even if your house is incredibly wasteful. Net zero energy is a little different. It means that you generate as much on site as you're using. And so again, you could have a very inefficient home and just have a lot of solar panels, but that's generally not affordable. So, most net zero, the strategy is to reduce your demand to the absolute minimum, as low as you can get it, and then make what's an affordable investment in some kind of renewable generation. And usually it's solar panels. Sometimes it's wind, but generally solar panels.
Okay, we have a couple of questions from people that are obviously in the building trades or know more than I do about some of these terms. Someone is asking if you use FSC certified lumber. Maybe you could explain what that is as well.
Yeah, FSC, it's a wonderful program that was developed by non-Canadians to certify timber, which is very unpopular with the Canadian forest industry. So in Canada, they do CSA approvals, and the forest industry in Canada has come up with a number of competing standards to FSC with differing levels of credibility, I guess I'd say. FSC, there's some legitimate critiques of FSC. FSC was developed, in Europe, I believe, and it has embedded in it a lot of ideas about what kind of communities forest industry should have. It's really was targeted at tropical rainforests. And so
Right.
I think some of the forest industry's complaints about FSC are probably slightly valid. But what it means is in Canada, really FSC lumber is not available. So you can special order it. It's almost like ordering lumber on Amazon and get it. And we've done that for some projects. But generally, we use the lumber that's most locally available. Mm-hmm. So on the Ecosage project, all of our slat ceilings were cut at P&E lumber, which is literally just down the hill. So, I appreciate FSC, but I would say locally, it's not something that we try particularly hard to source because I feel much more comfortable with what P&E lumber is doing than what FSC means.
Someone is asking what the advantage is of a lightweight roof. Is there a danger because of forest fires? A metal frame building, when the person's wondering, could it melt?
Yeah,
or what?
It's an interesting question. I mean, there's all kinds of discussion about how to be fire smart where we are. The best way to be fire smart is don't build in interface areas, right? So live downtown. But if you have to live in the interface, most of the fires are caused by embers settling on people's roofs. So the embers settling on a metal roof aren't going to do anything. If you have, let's say, a pile of wood beside your house and the fire burns right up next to your house and lights that pile of wood on fire, it really doesn't matter what your house is made of at that point. So even if you had cement board like we do at Ecosage, the studs inside are going to combust and your house is going to burn down. So fire smart is really about preventing embers from igniting the house. And so, we've done houses in the interface that have cedar siding, and I think there's really nothing wrong with that at all. I wouldn't really do cedar shakes, and that's been shown to be a real contributor to fires, but a metal roof, if the fire is so hot that it would melt the steel, then, the house is going to burn. Doesn't matter what you do.
And just one more question. Someone is surprised that you were able to give such low embodied carbon numbers with so much foam that you used in the raft slab.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, polystyrene, because it is a product made from fossil fuels, right? And I think that's the correct way to use fossil fuels, actually. So, the idea that we extracted fossil fuels and burned them, I think historically we'll look back on that as an absolute folly. And it's equivalent to if the Egyptians had figured out how to burn steel and had burned all the steel. And now we could look back and say, well, back then they had steel. Now it's all gone. I mean, fossil fuels are a wonderful resource. And if we make them into things like polystyrene, we've got building materials in perpetuity. If we burn it, we're destroying our atmosphere and wasting it. So, I think people in Alberta who are concerned about the oil patch being shut down, they've forgotten about plastic and polystyrene and, even epoxies and lubricants. I mean, even if you have windmills, obviously you have lubricants. So there's so many wonderful ways to use fossil fuels, and I think polystyrene really is one of them. You have to make sure it doesn't go into the Great Pacific Garbage Patch or anything like that. But yeah, it's a good material. And when SCMT program looked at the building, that they took all those materials into account and what it takes to manufacture them.
Well, thank you, Chris. I really appreciate this really detailed view, and yet you also gave us an overview of some of the concepts like passive housing. What is it? Just how you do it. Embodied carbon, giving us really specific ideas on that. So I appreciate that. And now we're going to go to sort of more of a zooming up view of the picture in the Okanagan. But first, we're actually doing really well for time. So I'm going to suggest just a 1-minute wiggle break because I can see people starting to do it anyway. So just take a break, stand up, sit down again, and then I'm going to hand things over to Sue to introduce our next speaker. But just have a stretch, everyone. Okay, Sue, it's all yours. Whenever you care to start.
I'll talk to all those empty chairs. Well, thank you, Chris. As Margaret said, we really appreciate you sharing your expertise with us. So our second guest speaker is David Cassian. David is the Community Sustainability Coordinator with the City of Penticton, having currently served in the position for 5 years. David was originally hired on with the city to help roll out the automated cart program and to fulfill the requirements of the Climate Action Revenue Program. And the position has grown to include climate action reporting and sustainability initiatives, staff liaison to the Sustainability Committee, EV station guru, waste and recycling compliance, and providing technical support at the city's biosolids compost site. David attended the University of Northern British Columbia in snowy Prince George, graduating in 2014 with a bachelor's degree of arts and environmental studies, and has been putting his education to good use since then. Having grown up in the South Okanagan, David brings a passion to serving the community around him, and he was the Town of Oliver's co-chair of the Food Action Advisory Committee. David currently lives in Oliver with his wife, 2 children, and a flock of black backyard chickens. You sound like a very busy person.
Oh,
David.
Yeah, time's flying by these days, to say the least.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sue, for that introduction. I'm going to share my screen now.
Great.
Great. I think everyone can see that. So I just want to start by saying thank you to Things First Okanagan for hosting this deep dive discussion series event on buildings and energy. I'm Dave Cassian. I've been the sustainability coordinator at the City of Penticton for some time, with my duties constantly evolving and changing. I'm excited to be here tonight to build on Chris's presentation and to discuss how the city can help lower the energy use of new and existing buildings. So I'm just going to include an update tonight on the 2021 climate action planning process, a breakdown of community emissions, BC step code implementation and where we're at with that, the home energy loan program, and a quick note on solar ready new builds. And we'll leave some time at the end for questions. So to briefly open up with an introduction to Penticton's climate action commitments, 12 years ago, the provincial government created a legislated target to reduce the total greenhouse gas emissions in the province by 33% from 2007 levels by 2020 and 80% by 2050. The charter was created because scientific consensus states that increasing emissions of human-caused greenhouse gases, such as carbon dioxide, methane, that are released into the atmosphere are affecting the Earth's climate. Reducing these emissions will generate environmental and health benefits for individuals, families, and communities. And Penticton was an early signatory to this charter and has been meeting requirements to measure, reduce, and report since then. So to act on climate action charter commitments, the city drafted 2 distinct documents that guide planning, a corporate climate action plan and a community climate action plan. These plans were adopted by council back in 2011, and it is these plans that the city will be updating as part of the climate action planning for 2021. So for tonight's discussion, I will chat a bit about the community plan and what the update will look to that. So we have an existing community climate action plan now with 2007 as the emissions baseline. And the plan has a goal to reduce emissions by 33% in the community by 2020. And this is based on that 2007 baseline. So the plans have strategies and actions that can be implemented by the local government that will have a direct impact on lowering community emissions. The remodeling was performed to forecast the amount of emissions reductions to determine the effectiveness of each strategy. Many actions have been completed in the existing plans, and as part of the plan update will be to calculate how many tons of greenhouse gas emissions have been reduced as a result and compared back to the forecast. So the meat of the plan really focuses on building better buildings, retrofitting existing buildings, increasing the use of alternative energy, building complete and compact communities, improving alternate transportation, and reducing and diverting waste from landfills. So some of the current climate action initiatives that the city has in motion are the updating of the climate action plans, voluntary implementation of step 3 of the BC STEP code, large-scale battery storage planned for 2023, rolling out more electric vehicle charging stations, and future waste diversion with the RDOS food waste program that's currently in the works. So the current climate action plans are now over 10 years old, and as many of the strategies and actions have been completed, it's just become time to update these plans. Over the past 10 years, the city has drafted a new OCP, and there's other big master plans in the works, such as the electric utility master plan and the transportation master plan. So it's really crucial to examine the long-term goals of the new OCP and the upcoming master plans and find synergies with new and revised climate action plans. Finding these synergies and projects that both support one another and reduce emissions will just help to make Penticton a greener and more sustainable community. And the updated plans will have fresh and science-based actions for continuing to lower community-based emissions, as well as extensive modeling to forecast the potential emissions reductions. So to help guide the rewriting of both plans, the city formed the Community Sustainability Advisory Committee, which is made up of knowledgeable and passionate individuals, including First Things First members that are on this presentation tonight. So sorry if you've seen some of this before, as well as council representation. And we're really working closely, and we'll be leaning on the committee heavily for their knowledge and to bring new perspectives to this planning process. Stakeholder engagement will also be a large component of the plans, as we want to make sure everyone will have a voice and can share their thoughts and ideas. If you haven't already, please be sure to sign up and subscribe to the city's online engagement platform, which is shapeyourcitypenticton.ca. And it's here that you can stay up to date and share your opinion on various initiatives such as the Lake to Lake cycling route, Skaha Lake Plan, Nanaimo Avenue Bridge, and more. There will be multiple opportunities to engage with the new plans, and keeping an eye on the city's social media and Shape Your City page will help to keep you up to date on engagement events. So how are we doing? How are we doing today? We have a picture of what actions and strategies reduce community-based emissions, but how are we really doing? The most recent and complete community energy and emission inventory were generated by the province back in 2007 and 2010. As part of the climate action planning updating this year, we're looking to generate an accurate and up-to-date community emissions inventory that can help us benchmark climate action progress going forward and to review the effectiveness of completed projects. To generate the carbon footprint of the community, we have to first look at emissions from 3 primary sources, which are transportation, buildings, and solid waste. So the 2010 emissions inventory was compiled by the province for municipalities in BC, and the purpose of the inventory is to gain a better understanding of emission sources, which can then be targeted and lowered. These inventories also serve as a baseline that future inventories can be compared to. Community emissions are calculated by quantifying the energy use of transportation, buildings, and solid waste. So when breaking down Penticton's community emissions, transportation accounts for the bulk emissions at 63%, followed by buildings at 27% and solid waste at 10%. The combined total of community emissions for the 2010 reporting year were just over 200,000 tons of carbon dioxide emitted. And in breaking down these emission sources of buildings a bit further, the use of natural gas to heat residential and commercial buildings accounts for 92% of the emissions from heating buildings in Penticton. Using electricity to heat and cool buildings would significantly lower greenhouse gas emissions. As has been discussed tonight, the emission factor in comparison with natural gas, as the electricity is used in BC is sourced from hydropower, which has a very low emissions factor when compared to natural gas. Building new homes at a higher efficiency such as step 3 of the building code, which we'll get the energy step code, will also lower emissions. Of note, there are advancements being made with renewable and natural gas that can help offset the emissions from natural gas. Other interesting projects in the works. Fortis BC has partnered with UBCO, and they're studying how they can further reduce emissions from the natural gas supply by blending hydrogen through the distribution network. So eagerly watching that as well. So how can we lower emissions from new and existing buildings? Components of the existing community climate action plan that will remain relevant and be expanded upon during the updates are to build more energy efficient buildings and to retrofit and improve existing buildings. For new builds, the focus is on improving energy efficiency, having high efficiency building envelopes, and developing programs that will encourage the use of on-site renewable energy. Improving existing buildings for energy efficiency includes tightening the envelope, using energy efficient appliances, and air sealing of windows and doors. So a program that will be highlighted and expanded upon by the revised action plans is the Home Energy Loan Program, which I will cover shortly in this presentation. So we're going to dive in a little bit to the BC Energy Step Code. We won't go too into detail into the requirements, but I'll give you a brief overview. So the BC Energy Step Code is a regulation that sets performance targets for new construction and groups them into steps that apply across various building types and regions in the province. The province of BC first introduced energy efficiency as a BC Building Code objective in 2008. And ever since, designers and builders have had the option to use either a prescriptive or performance approach to comply with the energy efficiency requirements. So it's important to note that the step code is a performance approach that looks at a building as a complete system and not a set of individual components. The lower steps are relatively straightforward to meet. The upper steps can be a bit more ambitious. Penticton has been a leader with implementing the step code, having voluntarily adopted step 1 in 2019 and adopting step 3 ahead of the game as well. As of January 1st this year, all Part 9 residential buildings now need to reach a minimum of step 3 of the step code. So Part 9 residential buildings include single family homes, 3 and 4-plex units, row housing, low-rise construction, and accessory suites. And by later this year, the city will also be offering incentives for Part 3 and light commercial Part 9 buildings that can meet a minimum of step 1. So over the past 18 months, some local builders have achieved step 3 or greater of the BC step code, while others have had difficulty meeting the minimum requirements. Of the Part 9 buildings that meet or exceed step 3, the most common thread has been builders and designers educating themselves on how to build using the performance approach. Achieving step 3 or higher of the step code can be done with minimal cost by taking a collaborative approach with owners, energy advisors, designers, building officials, and tradespeople. Although it's not mandatory yet, a mid-construction blower door test is highly recommended, and the city's bylaw may be changed in the future to require this test. With funding support from Fortis, the city is offering $500 rebates per buildings per year, up to a maximum of 3 buildings, to help offset the cost of the blower door tests. So for some assistance in modeling the forecasted energy demand for applicable step code buildings, it's recommended that builders and developers work closely with local energy advisors. I've provided a list of all licensed energy advisors in the area for reference. This list can also be found on the city's building webpage. There's also some great tools out there like modeling software such as StepWin. StepWin is a software program that provides builders, designers, and energy advisors with simple ways to test different design options and considerations while designing a home. And it lets designers just move through different scenarios and find which solutions are the most cost-effective and energy efficient options. For some more cost savings, there are many Clean BC and Fortis rebates to choose from when committing to higher steps of the step code. The Clean BC rebate supports greenhouse gas reductions in new construction high-performance buildings with the goal of making climate-friendly homes more affordable and accessible for British Columbians. Fortis BC also provides rebates, and buildings built to step 3 or better qualify for $4,000 and up to $10,000 in rebates and $500 towards energy advisor support. The city's offering a 5% building permit refund for buildings that achieve step 4 or greater of the BC Energy Step Code. So shifting gears a little bit to the Home Energy Loan Program. So the City of Penticton Electric Utility has a home retrofit program called the Home Energy Loan Program. I'm going to call this HELP from now on. HELP is a loan service available to residents through the city for eligible energy efficiency upgrades. To qualify, it's a pretty straightforward program. To qualify, you need to be a Penticton Electric Utility customer, and you must currently reside in the home that's being upgraded, and you must own that home. The HELP is repaid by the customer through monthly payments on their City of Penticton utility bill. So the maximum loan amount is $10,000 with a 10-year amortization. The interest rate is fixed at prime plus 0.5% interest and is set when the loan is granted. It's pretty simple. Loans can be repaid in full, in part, at any time. There's no penalties. When a lump sum payment is applied, the amortization of the loan is reduced. If you sell your home before the amortization period is over, the loan will be repaid in full upon the sale of the house. HELP can be used for the same energy efficiency retrofits that are eligible for rebates through Florida Species Program, as well as any improvements that are recommended in the energy audit pre-assessment done on the home. So some examples of eligible upgrades include insulation, reducing air leakage, installing more efficient space and water heating systems, replacing windows and doors as well. So residents that sign up for the home energy loan program will first have an energy assessment conducted on their home and will also receive an EnerGuide ranking. The cost to homeowners for the assessment is $35, and the result is a comprehensive report that identifies which parts of the home should be retrofitted to have the greatest impact on energy use and costs. After summer, all of the recommended upgrades have been completed. A post-assessment will then identify the impact on energy and cost savings. The post-assessment has a cost of $200 to participants of the HELP program and can also be included in the loan amount. The pre and post-assessments must be conducted by a certified energy advisor that's licensed by NRCan. The pre and post-assessments examine annual energy consumption minus any on-site renewable energy, how energy is used in the home, where heat is lost, and it provides a detailed analysis of the building's envelope and mechanical systems. So in the slide here is a real example from Penticton's HELP program, where we see 60% of the total energy is used to heat the home with natural gas, with water heating as the second largest energy user. Heat in this home is primarily lost through the walls, windows, and basement foundation. So this assessment really helps homeowners target areas of their home to retrofit in order to have the greatest impact on energy and cost savings. So in continuing with the same example from the HELP program, the homeowner started with a single family home that used 145 gigajoules per year of natural gas and electricity. This energy use, the majority being natural gas with that high emissions factor, was 6 tons per year of greenhouse gas emissions. After using the HELP program to finance a higher efficiency gas furnace, their natural gas use dropped by 29 gigajoules per year, which also reduced the greenhouse gas emissions from this home by 1.6 tons per year. The HELP program really aids homeowners in retrofitting their property for energy and cost savings. Another benefit of the program is that it helps reduce community-based greenhouse gas emissions generated from heating and cooling our residential buildings. This program will be advertised heavily throughout 2021, and it will be a subject of focus during the updating of the climate action plans, as we really feel it's an effective tool that can help residents in financing energy retrofits to their home that they may otherwise not be able to afford. So now we'll take a brief look at solar-ready homes. The term solar-ready applies to both solar voltaic panels and solar hot water systems. So during the construction of a new home, the cost to build a roof and walls strong enough to support a solar PV or hot water system is estimated at $200 to $500. A solar-ready system can then be installed at a future date for a lot less than it would cost to upgrade a home that is not solar-ready. The province of BC has some great resources on solar-ready homes, including their 2013 regulations and solar hot water guide. In section 3 of the guide to solar hot water regulation, it describes the requirement to provide for the future installation of solar panels or solar domestic hot water systems. And this is the requirement to allocate an area on or near the building that will be designated for the future installation of solar collectors. Solar collectors may be installed on a roof, wall, building lot, or an accessory building such as a garage or carriage house that has ample and unshaded interaction with the sun. The city is currently looking at how we can incorporate solar-ready requirements for all new single-family homes into our building bylaws, as it gives people the option to more easily and efficiently install solar panels on their home. There are some increased structural requirements for solar-ready homes, including two conduit runs and an area that is designated for the future installation of solar collectors that has a minimum size footprint of 9.3 square meters. Structural members and roof trusses must also be designed to accommodate a uniform dead load of 0.24 kilopascals, in addition to design loads required by the BC Building Code. Some buildings may be exempt from solar-ready guidelines if they do not have any solar access due to being blocked by other buildings. This proposed solar-ready bylaw is supported by the province, and it may become embedded in Penticton's building requirements in the not-so-distant future. So we've covered a lot of material in tonight's presentation. I want to thank everyone for hanging in there. I want to conclude my presentation by putting up the contact information for some city staff in case anyone's wanting to dive into any of these specific subjects a bit further. But I am here for some questions now as well.
That's great, David. Thank you very much. If you could turn off your screen share. We asked you to cover a lot, and you did, and I'm very appreciative of it. I think it's given people a really good view of what Penticton's doing. You know, here's Penticton. We're kind of a sleepy little town where you think probably not much is happening, but the staff and council are hard at work. They've been enacting programs that help people to do retrofits and to get our emissions down. Now, there are a whole bunch of questions, so maybe I'll just launch right in. Ella asks, you had a picture of a large battery storage building. What is that for? What's that part of?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the term peak shaving is a big subject with energy use right now. And so basically, whether you're buying energy for your home or whether you're the city of Penticton buying energy on a large scale as a utility, you're charged on your peak usage. So you know, when appliances are running, when your air conditioner is going full tilt in the summer, that's when we have the most energy use. And so on a community scale, it's very similar to a home in that there's really two big peaks of energy use in the year, in the summer for cooling and in the winter for heating. So when we purchase power, we're charged based on that peak usage. And the goal with battery storage is to charge batteries, massive 1 megawatt batteries, to charge them when the peak demand is lowest, typically overnight. And then when the peaks start to rise during the day, you push electricity back onto the grid to help lower your peaks. So the ultimate goal of that is to save money in purchasing energy and to use that saved resource to ultimately lower electric utility rates and to possibly fund future projects for the electric utility in the future. And so that's in the electric utility master plan. I think they're looking at that for 2023 or 2024, but it will be an interesting project to follow.
Great. Now you mentioned that the goal in the community action plan was to lower emissions by 33%, and you implied that you have no clue where we are. Why is it difficult to get that information? Is it staff resources to collect it every year, or is there something missing coming from governments where it would make it easier to know what a community's carbon emissions would be?
Yeah, that's a great question. The 2007 and 2010 inventories that the province put together were extremely helpful because it gives that nice snapshot in time of energy use. And as part of the climate action updating for this year, we are going to be crunching those numbers with the Community Energy Association to see how those past projects that we've completed have, really reduced emissions. So there is some difficulty in compiling a snapshot of community emissions. You have to have access to electrical use, which we do. There's natural gas data from suppliers. very tricky one is transportation fuel, though. It's tricky to obtain the data. It's not free. You have to purchase it from companies. And then you also have to break that data down. We live in, Penticton's located in a tourist destination. A lot of people such as myself commute into work. So you have to take that aggregate regional data for transportation fuel and really break it out to represent Penticton and the commuters and the tourists to the area as well. And that's something that I'm looking for support for with the Community Energy Association as well, because these are pretty important numbers that we'll be putting together, and there's a lot of data to crunch. So is it impossible to do? Definitely not. But we're looking forward to getting some help in that.
I think it's something all municipalities are facing, and I know that it's a question that the group Climate Caucus, which is elected members and staff people, it's a Canadian association. They're really trying to work on getting emissions numbers for reporting. How else can we reduce our emissions?
Yeah, and when the province did it, it was done the same for every community in BC as well, and having that same benchmark for every municipality, I think, is really important as well.
Yeah, we have a couple of questions about costs of paying for and costing retrofits. People may have heard of the PACE program, which is a program where you can take out a loan and the money actually goes onto your mortgage. So it's and it sort of stays with your house when you sell the house. The question is, do you know the status of PACE programming? I don't think a municipality could bring it in. I think the whole province would have to bring it in. Have you heard about that?
And the home energy loan program, I believe fundamentally is very similar to the PACE program, other than you're putting that loan onto your utility bill. It's a very low risk loan as well, because it's only 0.5% above prime, and there's no penalties for getting out of it early, or and some people will apply to the home energy loan program. They'll go through the energy audit process, and they might realize that they can afford the upgrades they need, and there's no pressure to get a loan. We're happy that people engage in that process in getting that EnerGuide ranking, and to really analyze, how can I reduce emissions and energy use and save money? And I think that's really the important part of the program. Helping people pay for that when needed is also great too. But starting with that energy assessment, which it costs $35 to participants in the health program, but if you go to get that privately, it's typically several $100s to get that on your own. So I think that as well is a good component of the program.
There's a question on whether you have any data on people's cost saving, people that use the health program, the cost versus the cost savings.
Sure. We don't have any data on that. We haven't done a lot of follow-up with people who have engaged in the program. Actually, for a recent presentation, I did call a couple of people and ask what their experience was and what they decided to do, what retrofits they decided to do at their home. But as we go through the rewriting of the climate action planning, we're going to put a lot of attention into the home energy loan program. And I think you're going to see details added, like, kind of informal data requests, especially natural gas. Because we own our electric utility, it's really easy to look at the electricity savings that residents have. But if they're replacing gas with gas, we really don't have a good idea for what their actual energy savings are. And I think that's really important for tracking the success of the program.
A question about incentives for builders. We learned about low embodied carbon in building materials. Is there a possibility of there being some incentives for builders that can prove they've chosen lower alternatives?
Sure. So, encouraging people to use locally sourced wood instead of concrete, things like that, to keep the embodied carbon low. At this time, I don't believe there's a lot of tools that municipalities have other than education. There have been some communities I was reading about today that, pardon me, I can't remember the term, but if they sell city-owned property, they put a caveat on the property that that if new construction is to occur, there's some parameters around that. And there has been some talk of introducing embodied carbon into that. But I think, you know, embodied carbon is something really important that has just the understanding of it has been growing quite a bit over the past few years. And, you know, as a municipality, I think providing just that education to builders now would be very important. And then I'm not too sure how we would implement anything, you know, mandatory or any requirements for that.
Thanks. There are a couple of comments about percentage of Penticton's emissions, commercial, residential, that sort of thing. And I would just encourage people to have a look at the current community action plan that's on Penticton's website. It breaks everything down. There's nice pie charts. You can look at everything, and it's really quite an well-written, easy to read document. And of course, we're all looking forward to a new updated document that's going to be developed this year with lots of community input. Someone is asking about disposal of refrigerants, or is the city doing anything about refrigerants?
Yeah, great question.
Yep.
In the book Drawdown, you know, I believe I think it's the very first the number one action that can be taken to lower global emissions is to change the type of refrigerants and to capture refrigerants as well. There's nothing that the city is doing at this time to support refrigerant to capture anything like that.
Okay. And someone says, what's the blower test that you referred to?
Sure. So the blower door test is typically performed by an energy advisor, and that is to check the air tightness of a home. So they basically seal off their shut all the windows and doors, and they put a giant fan on one of the exterior doors, and they get a pressure reading, so they can determine if a lot of air is being sucked through the home, then they can determine the amount of air leakage. So the less air leakage, the better, the more tight the envelope is. And a blower door test, like I mentioned, isn't required at this time, but it's really important to do it mid-construction when you still have access to your structure and, you know, to your windows and door frames. Because if you do need to make any changes, trying to make those changes later on could be very costly.
Thank you. I think we're going to stop questions for now. There'll be time for some discussion in a few minutes. Again, I really encourage everyone to go on the City of Penticton website. There's a lot there. Fortis has a really good website too, with all of the rebate programs. There's a lot to learn there. And I'll pass things over to Sue again.
Thanks so much, David. That was super interesting. Lots to think about. So we have close to half an hour left. And what we wanted to talk about is ideas for local action. What can we do locally to reduce carbon emissions from buildings? So we had a number of readings and videos, and I think Margaret's going to start us off with a couple of questions, and then we'll have a general discussion, see what ideas everyone has.
Yeah. So I hope that you had a chance to look at the readings and video suggestions that we sent to you. These are very carefully curated. We spend a lot of time finding newsworthy short articles and videos. So have a look if you haven't already. But one of the links we sent you was a video from Gabriola Energy, Gab Energy. It's a nonprofit society where they order and install solar systems and other energy systems. It's all to do with community retrofitting and solar installation. So people are taking control of their energy production and consumption. And we are wondering if people in the Valley might be interested in the idea of a co-op program for bulk purchases. So it could be solar supplies, it could be heat pumps, this sort of thing. So we have prepared a poll, which Lori is going to pop on the screen, and just fill out, if you could fill it out and let us know what your thoughts are on that. Would you think about participating in in a program like that. And any thoughts on that? Put it in the chat perhaps, or maybe just unmute yourself. Has anyone lived in a community where there's been any kind of co-op buying program for specifically to address energy? No? Anyway, have a look. Have a look at that video if you haven't. So everyone's doing the poll. Oh, I got to do mine too. Okay. We've been able to fill it in. And Lori's put the Gabe Energy link in the chat if you want to check it out. And by the way, you can save this chat and people's questions and ideas. I'll show you how to do that at the end. Lori, can we have the results of the poll? Are we ready yet? Oh, yes, maybe. Okay, so between the yeses and the maybes, we've got most of the audience is interested anyway in the idea of perhaps group purchasing for energy savings. And that's the kind of thing that possibly First Things First could facilitate, or at least discuss more. Another reading we sent you was a bylaw from Lake Country. They have a GHG reduction and conservation DPA, development permit area, and this encompasses all of Lake Country. So when a new subdivision or private dwelling is being built, the DPA provides this tool. It's a series of questions for the homeowner to think through how they could be lowering emissions through their work. And so Lori again is going to put on the screen and show you what some of the ideas are. So it's, what would you call this? Oops, it disappeared from my screen. Can you see it? I can't see it anymore. Could you put it on again, Lori? It's just allows, it's voluntary for now, but it allows people to think about materials and colors, and they have a section of the website on this, large windows, and then they can have it, their home plan assessed by an expert so that they can say whether they fit in with the development permit area. So it talks about natural vegetation. This is the some of the guidelines to do with buildings. They have other guidelines for siting and for landscape. So I thought it was quite an interesting idea that an official community plan would include guidelines for creating energy efficient homes. Thanks, Lori. You can take that off now. We have a few people that work for the city or city councilors, 2 of them here. Any ideas on whether this sort of thing might be looked at for our region? Again, it is voluntary right now, so it's just a tool for homeowners to use.
Yeah, the city used to have a sustainability checklist that was given out to builders. Yep. And you know, for reasons I'm not entirely sure of, that kind of dropped off, but that is something as well that we are looking to bringing back up to the table as well, is that Good. Voluntary style checklist. That's really just that educational component. Great.
Well, those were 2 things on my list from the readings. Any other thoughts that have come up either from the presentations tonight or from some of the readings you've done? Any questions you have or comments just you want the group to think about? And this time, feel free to just maybe raise your hand and unmute yourself. Kari.
Yeah, I just have a question. I'm not sure how on topic it is, but the question about the refrigerants, which as you were saying, David, is like #1 on the list in the drawdown book. And there's no particular plan in Penticton, and I really don't know what locally we can or should be doing about that. But it seems like kind of a gap because there's a lot of work that's going on in some of these other areas. Does anyone have more information about that?
I listened to a really wonderful podcast about guys that go around and buy old refrigerants from all over and get carbon credits for it. So there's money to be made from picking up refrigerants around the country. But yeah, I think California has really strict laws about disposal of refrigerants. And I always assumed that Canada already had those laws, but maybe I'm wrong. Jay? Chime in if you've got, yeah, thanks.
When I was running the Power Smart program, which was similar to HELP, as I mentioned in a chat, you have to be really careful about the mix of measures that you're offering, because some of them have really high returns on your investment in terms of carbon saving in this case, and others don't. And sometimes the appeal to the public that's in those programs, we did about 36,000 homes. And one of the big things that everyone wanted were replacement windows, rebate windows. And of all the options you have on the supply side versus, or on the demand side versus the supply side, is those windows have a really low return in terms of their carbon saving. They look great. They improve the resale value of the house immensely, which is, I think, one of the main driving forces. But they, from our point of view, they weren't what we were looking for. So we actually restricted to some degree the amount of windows that would be financed in the program. Otherwise, we just weren't getting the bang for the buck.
Thanks, Jay.
Just throw that in.
Yeah, it's interesting. We had an energy audit this year, and we also replaced some windows, and our window guy shook his head and he said, "No, you don't want to do that. It costs too much money." When we talked about the getting the highest standard of window, that was quite expensive. He was very discouraging. So you have to work with some of the salespeople too. Nicholas has said that there is a co-op in Regina that is a successful solar co-op. So there are examples around of that. So we'll maybe do a session on it sometime. Any other questions from folks that want to raise their hand? Don't see any here. Okay, I think we'll wrap it up. And we have really covered a lot tonight. A lot of thanks to our two speakers. We try to do a new topic every month, and if any of you have ideas or thoughts, feedback for us, or ideas for future deep dive conversations and speakers, if you want to put it in the chat or just email us. There's a reminder that we are going to record the chat, so if you're interested in watching it again or bringing it to somebody else's attention, we'll have a copy and we'll send you, we'll be posting a short summary that will be on our website. Lori can put up all the information on how to get a hold of us. We were originally going to ask you whether you'd be interested in watching this again, but we're just gonna go ahead and put it on our channel, and we'll let you know about that in a future newsletter. So if you'd like to subscribe to our events newsletter, you can go to our website there. That's our Facebook information as well. And I think sorry, I have to look for my notes again here. I think we're more or less finished. Our next deep dive is going to be Thursday, February the 25th. All the way through in our conversations, quite often at the end of the evening, people say, yes, but how do we get this going in our community? We thought we would just have a topic of raising community awareness and community action as our next topic. And we'll be speaking to people that are in communities where there's an active sort of climate ambassador program. Other topics we're researching for the future: food waste and sustainability, agriculture, diet, forestry, climate and health. These are all things that we're researching. So send us ideas, or hopefully you'll come to some future programs. We've really enjoyed hosting you this evening. And it's 8:22, and you can all relax, have a cup of tea or glass of wine. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks to everybody for coming tonight. And if you have any other comments, you can email us at the info at First Things First, and we'll get back to you for any of the documents. I see that Cameron posted that refrigerant, ODS, ozone depleting substances are heavily regulated in Canada and BC. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
You can save the chat by going to the 3 dots in the place where you write your chat message. There should be 3 dots. If you click on that, you can save the chat, and we'll let you do that before we close down the Zoom. And thanks so much. It's great. Good information.
Or you can stay and talk, whatever you like. Night night.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for all the effort you've put into this. It was an excellent presentation. And thank you to our 2 speakers.
Stay tuned for the next one.
Fabulous, fabulous presentation. Thank you, Margaret. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, great.
Okay, Lori. Okay.
Thanks.
See you.
Bye.
It really